And following up, we're set now is Chief Don Tom, who's representing the Wasonic First Nations here on the Tsartlip.
CM the Solquan, CM the Ciea, Hai Tzadka, Quatsi Tzad Titel Namet Tenequel, Namet Tenutayeth Namet, and Quotlitston, Utini Tanat and Isalsibla, Utini Uchathith, Utini Stamenis, Nat and Utayeth Namet, Set Samachwalla. My dear respected elders, family, friends, my family name is Quotlitston. I'm the chief of Tsartlip First Nation. My grandparents are late Charlie Tom and late Nora Tom. It's important that our elders say that we're not here alone, that our ancestors are here with us, and it's important that I do an introduction in our language so that they know who we are and what we're talking about. I am fortunate to be here today amongst the panel to present, and I think it's a great opportunity for North Saanich to hear from Steelhead LNG, to hear from a perspective from First Nations, and to hear some science. But I'm up here to give you our perspective of lake. Our elders, when we heard, well, prior to the announcement, it was leaked that Malahat was making an announcement with Steelhead LNG prior to their announcement. And our elders came together, our community came together, and they were quick to give me the mandate to absolutely unequivocally say no to this project, and under no circumstances will we support this project. Our issue isn't with them because they are looking out for their future, and just as equally as they're looking out for theirs, we're looking out for ours. And I just want to say that to my relatives. Our issue primarily is with the proponent at this time, and and to be honest, it hasn't been a good relationship thus far with Steelhead LNG or Malahat LNG. When we learned of the announcement, it was through the media, and you know, it hasn't been. And Steelhead has come to our council, and they acknowledge that they did not set out how they intended to, and that the manner in which they did probably wasn't the most appropriate. And I think the manner in which they did, I think doesn't help them in being successful as well. But I want to say that, you know, our elders have said very clear, and we've been working for 2 decades to rehabilitate our inlet. The damage that has been done, and I consider it offensive to call an industrial site because we know it as Yas. Yas is our sacred mountain. I know it's a sacred mountain to Malahat as well. But it's a place of refuge. It's a place of healing that we go, that we have traditionally done and still do today. But our elders have said to me, and which I admire their strength and their fight and their resolve in this matter, they have said, I will die before I give up my rights to hunt and fish before I squander that opportunity to support a project like this that would completely undo everything we've been trying to do to rehabilitate the Sandwich Inlet. So much damage has been done by cement factories, by farm water, by derelict boats. Our inlet isn't in the best shape right now currently, and I think if the proponent, should they be successful, which I don't think they will, it would damage it even more. That is the purview of our community and our elders. As the moderator had said, and I have been speaking on behalf of Tsartlip and the community, but also today for this very moment, I've been granted permission to speak on behalf of Pakwachin, Sayout, and Saikem on this matter. And I want to make it very clear, as we said on March 1st, that our nations are the successors and beneficiaries of our rights recognized, confirmed by the Douglas Treaty of 1852 with the Crown. The treaty provides unqualified protection and recognition of our rights to carry on our fisheries as formerly. This is confirmed by every level of the courts in BC over many decades. Any permit or authorization that has been provided to date by the proponent, in our opinion, is invalid. The National Energy Board and their export license was issued last year to the proponent without even notice to us, let alone engagement to seek our consent. And we, the chiefs of Quesanich, we stand together to also put the government of British Columbia on notice that they do not have jurisdiction to interfere with the continuity of our treaty, our rights, and will incur any liability and put any LNG project at significant risk of cancellation should they choose to provide permits and authorization to the proponent without our consent. I want to say how important that is that the proponent has gone to the NEB for an export license. They did not notify us. You look at the process in which Kinder Morgan had to do, and they went to the NEB in a backroom permit that was issued. To us, it's invalid because they didn't seek our consent. They did not once come and seek our consent, and it's in our opinion that NEB export license that they requested from the National Energy Board is invalid, based on the idea that they haven't even come to talk to us. And I want to say that I cannot trust the proponent based on the fact that they didn't come and talk to us prior to the announcement. They went to the NEB. They didn't even disclose the location when they went to go for the permit. So I just want to say that from our point of view in Quesanich, we are opposed to this project on all levels, not just the engagement with us as First Nations, but we are opposed to the floating LNG facility. We're opposed to the underground pipeline, and we're opposed to any tanker traffic that may potentially come into our territories, because we will not subject our community nor your community to the risks and dangers that this will bring with this project.
It's easy for me to observe, as all of you have observed, that there is a lot of passion here this evening, and it's wonderful that we're having this dialogue, because, you know, Winston Churchill many years ago said it's always better to jaw than to war. And what we're seeing tonight is jaw-jawing, and I'm very pleased to have this dialogue taking place. Now, We're going to move to something a little bit different now. Now we're in the world of science, and Frank Whitney is an expert on the oceanography of Saanich Inlet. He's going to give us an overview of the oceanographic character of this rather fantastic fjord that sits on our doorstep. Frank.
Thank you, Tom. This will be brief. I've been involved in various studies in Saanich Inlet since I started in oceanography back in 1969. So I'm well imbued in all sorts of studies. One not too long ago was the Saanich Inlet study, when Bamerton was being targeted as a possible town site. And so the province at that time put a lot of effort into understanding the circulation of the inlet, enhancing our science, and so on. So there's some very good studies behind the science I'm going to show you here. So in this 1995 study, one of my colleagues put some surface drifters on the inlet, and they did this in winter when there were winds blowing. And so the center panel, I have a little pointer here somewhere. I won't try. The center panel shows what happens to drifters when there's a good prevailing wind, winter wind. Drifters and surface waters exit the inlet rather quickly, within less than a day, I'd say. In summer, when we're dealing with weak tides, neap tides, this is the other extreme. You can actually have waters retained in the inlet for several days. Okay, thank you. Good. So you can see a little jar setting up off Pad Bay here, where a drifter circled for several days. And so this is the kind of study that gives us a good idea of what's going on in Saanich surface waters. Tides and wind are really crucial for driving circulation in what we know is a fairly sluggish inlet. The deep waters of Saanich have been studied at least since the 1950s. It's a very interesting basin. The deep waters have no oxygen in them for most of the year. Only in late summer does lightly oxygenated water penetrate into the basin, and this happens on the weakest tides of the year, and also when there is coastal upwelling off the shores of Vancouver Island. So coastal upwelling brings in denser waters that creep in through Wanafuka, perch on the sill of Saanich. When a neap tide comes, then they can flow into the inlet, and the basin for a brief period of time is lightly oxygenated. Then an oxy builds up again. The surface, I did some studies in the 70s where we went out and sampled fairly frequently, and we know that what controls the biology of the inlet is, of course, the sun. And so we see very strong growth. The green line is following chlorophyll, very low in winter. We get into March, April period, and there's enough solar energy to create a large bloom of algae, and that bloom dies off as the nutrients that accumulated through winter get used up. And so we have this big spring bloom that is typical of all waters in the BC coast pretty well. What happens in the summer then is the moon takes over, and we start looking at the tidal cycle, the 14-day tidal cycle, where there's stronger mixing on spring tides, which allows some exchange of water between Satellite Channel and Saanich Inlet, and then we'll get these periodic, I'm going to come back here. These periodic blooms that will occur in bursts through the summer. So that's the simple biology for the inlet. The plankton are very productive. It's one of the more productive inlets probably in the world, but in BC anyhow, it's a highly productive inlet because of this constant exchange of water between Satellite Channel and Saanich. Back in 1996, I don't know if Tom was involved in this, but it was certainly his interest. A wonderful ship came into Saanich and cored right through the sediment record, right down to bedrock. And this core gives us a wonderful history of a lot of what's gone on the BC coast in the past 14,000 years since ice retreated from this area. And so you can, if you actually saw the core, this is just a graphic representation of the core, but actually the core has all sorts of nice little laminae in them because there's a dark light banding that goes on from winter to summer. And so you can actually almost count down the beds, and you know exactly where you are in the core. You can take a look, just very much like tree rings, you can take a look at what's happened in a core like this over thousands of years. And one of the focuses of the study was to take a look at the frequency of large earthquakes, where you'd see disruption of sediments. And I believe, I don't know the exact result of that, but I think out of this core, there's some evidence that over 300 to 700 year periods, there are major earthquakes in this area. We know that that is an issue for BC. But other things came out of this core too. There were bits of fish scales and bones left behind in the core. And you can see the kinds of fish that early on, as Saanich Inlet opened up, first fish to come into the area were herring and hake, and then there's sort of a history of salmon and cod coming in only, 6,000 or 7,000 years ago. And kind of an interesting history going back a long ways in Saanich. One of the interesting little tidbits that one of my colleagues gave me was that there's been a general fish decline over about the past 1,000 years in Saanich. And I'm not going to speculate on why that might be the case, but certainly circulation we've seen in the 20, 30 years that I've been looking in this area recently, we see circulation changes, more water coming up from California perhaps, and that water is less productive, brings different fish in and so on. So it could be a change in coastal circulation, it could be some activity of humans, we don't know, or I don't know I should say. Saanich Inlet is very low in oxygen, so hypoxia is a big deal in oceans these days. The ocean is becoming more stratified as we warm the surface layer and we melt ice sheets. And so in the waters off our coast, we know that we're losing glacier out of Alaska and BC, and the freshwater input is enough from these glaciers that I believe it is helping stratify the surface of the ocean. That stratification means that it's harder for winter winds to get oxygen into the interior of the ocean, and we're seeing a lot of waters in BC, in fact right across the North Pacific, we see a decline in oxygen levels. And this is being picked up in Saanich Inlet too. And so as a laboratory for trying to understand what's going on with hypoxia, these low oxygen environments, we've got a wonderful site here to study. Science is a big player in Saanich Inlet. I have to say, there's a lot of graduate students out of University of Victoria, UBC, who are focusing on processes in Saanich Inlet to better understand greenhouse gases, impacts of hypoxia on life. And you've probably noticed some of the activity going on in Saanich over the years as University of Victoria, first of all, installed a cable out about 3 kilometers off Pat Bay, and then put down a whole bunch of instruments on the bottom, including cameras where they can follow how organisms move as oxygen changes. There's a drifter, or I should say a glider that one scientist is using to do some more detailed studies up and down through the inlet. And recently there's a surface buoy that's gone out off Yarrow Point, halfway down towards Bampton. And there's going to be, off this, there is a profiling package, so we can now take a look at what's going on right through the water column, rather than just on the bottom. So I guess to summarize, I just wanted to make a point that there's a lot known about Saanich, there's a lot more to learn about Saanich, and science is really active there. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. It's always good to bring some science directly into the conversation, and the science is going to continue now with the discussion by Owen Fick.
Hi, Mayor, Councillors, attendees, thank you for coming. It's no secret I'm not a fan of this proposal. I've spoken here several times. Tonight I'm going to give you 11 reasons why so. It adds some information to it. My career spans the science world and the business world, and these reasons span that too. I will have to go fairly quickly. I planned for a longer presentation timeline, but you're always free to ask questions and I can go back over some of it. It's not a good idea. You have a beautiful inlet. I'm here because my children said, leave us a better planet than you inherited from your parents. That's big. Why? Number one, Wasanich First Nations don't want this. After 200 years of abuse, I think they deserve to be listened to. Neither does the Galshan Valley Nation Breakfast, who has an OCP, Official Community Plan, that says no LNG facilities. I don't know how much clearer it can get. BC gas is mostly fracked. It's not the gas that you've been burning to date. Now almost 70% of BC's gas is fracked up in northeast BC. It's an extremely highly destructive practice. You drill down, you turn the drill sideways, you go along the coast seam, you explode something, you pump liquids down there, and out comes the gas. You treat it and send it down to the coast. But a typical fracking site looks like that. The problem with it is that fracked wells decline significantly in production, productivity. Over about 30 months, you had to pick up sticks and move over. You eventually wind up with a landscape that looks like that. That's one is in Wyoming, and here's one in Texas. That's happening to all around northeast BC right now, because in order to get the planned 82 million tons of LNG to the coast and out of there, you're going to have to drill about 50,000 new wells, and that's Treaty 8 territory. So that while the may be popular on the coast, it is extremely unpopular there. Did I mention they have earthquakes? The bullseyes are between 3 and 4 on the Richter scale. We set a world record for fracking-induced earthquakes last year. Sandwich Inlet, I gasped when I heard that somebody was planning to put an LNG facility in Sandwich Inlet. It's an extremely unsafe location. Who says so? The industry itself. Do not put LNG plants in narrow inland waters with significant commercial, recreation, and ferry traffic. This is the industry's own association, who set the rules and have a quite proud safety record because it set rules that they follow. This does not follow that rules and cannot claim the same safety record. Sandia National Labs looked at this after 9/11 for the US government and concluded that an LNG tanker with a hole in the side of it, either as a result of a collision or an accident, or worse, a terrorist attack, would be a pretty dangerous thing. Would spread out as a low cloud of vapor across the water and would eventually hit an ignition source and catch fire. It burned, by the way, at 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Not terribly comforting, and it said you really shouldn't put LNG plants within 3.5 kilometers of people. And similarly, transit of the tankers shouldn't come within that zone either. Why 3.5 kilometers? Because that's the maximum limit in which a vapor cloud would travel at an ignition point. Pick your outer ring there and see how much of Sandwich, how much of Malahat, how much of Mill Bay is included in that. This would not be allowed in the US, because they put them in out-of-the-way places like southern Louisiana and other places like that. So US rules, had they applied here, wouldn't allow this. In the kayaking spot, these LNG tankers can't see anything that doesn't have a radar image within about a mile in front of them. You don't stand much of a chance in the kayak on a Sunday afternoon. One of these things comes by. Floating liquefaction plants are an experiment. There isn't a single one operating anywhere in this world. So this is an experiment. A typical onshore, there are lots of onshore plants, but floating ones, no. There's one plan for Australia. By the way, the separation between the big tank and the tanker is for safety reasons, for one. And the big thing in the front is that thing, folks. That thing's a big refrigerator. You're going to just tuck all that into a ship. Those are going to be pretty big ships in your inland. This comes to pass. This is Shellnew's Prelude floating LNG planned for next year in northwest Australia. It's about 5 football fields long. It can handle about 3.6 million tons a year. Yours proposal this year is somewhere between 6 and 7. So Depending on the configuration, this could be visiting your place. Ship-to-ship LNG transfer is pretty risky business, particularly in the high wind. There are usually some rules set by harbour masters. There's no harbour master in Sound Inland. The plant will burn gas for power, emit megatons of GHGs, acidify the ocean, and accelerate climate change, and what's not to like. The emissions, upstream direct would be about over 1.5 million tons. Upstream 2.5 to 6, depending on who's counting fugitive gases. In Canada, total 4 to 8 million tons. That's about between 60 and 30% of BC's total emissions. Not so good. And then downstream, about 16 million tons when somebody burns it at the other end. Over a 20-year time frame, shale gas may be a worse climate warmer than coal. This is studies by Cornell University. Basically says this idea that it'll replace coal-burning plants in China and all will be fine is rubbish. Flaring and light pollution will affect the aesthetics of the inlet, and Anchorage proposals bother your near neighbours on the islands. They tell you about the flare. Every LNG plant has one. Ask Steelhead. Cape-sized anchorages are requested for Gabriolas North Shore, 5 of them. Needless to say, they're not wildly pleased with the idea of LNG tankers and oil tankers and other freighters parked off their northeast shore. When they bought their places, they didn't count that one in. Using seawater once through seawater, OTC, risks turning Salmon Inlet into a marine desert. Basically because you intake something like 50,000 tons of water every hour to carry away the heat of liquefaction. You pump it full of biocides so that it doesn't foul up. Things that like hot stuff don't foul up the pipes of the inlet. And then you pour it all back into this inlet with flushes once a year. Do that every hour of every day for 25 years, and you can basically kiss fish and shellfish goodbye in Salmon Inlet. LNG economics, BC has missed the LNG boat. That's a picture of the Titanic. Why? Because the Australian experiment has been described by Credit Suisse as a train wreck in slow motion. Amounts of the new LNG supply is arriving in the next 5 years, mostly aimed at Asia. These are all the plants that mainly in the US and Australia that are going to contribute to a total glut at a time when demand is actually dropping, not increasing. And the Asian price, of course, has plummeted after the slight uptake after Fukushima. This costs about, well, as of today, it's about $4.50, and you can't make it, that red line says you can't make it for less than 12 in BC and ship it. So if somebody wants a business case for this, here it is right here. One of the airline guys said, how to become a millionaire is to buy an LNG proposal and wait a while. Well, after you've started as a billionaire. LNG benefits from BC are highly questionable. 75,000 long-term jobs, BC's first in line, debt-free BC, but hey, Steelhead's going to build this thing in Korea and China, floating plants. They've already awarded the contract to Williams, a US company, to build a pipeline. Most of the jobs will be worked out in drill rig ones, like these. My children don't particularly like the idea that this is their future. Not about yours. And then there's the whole giveaway of taxes, no PST, reduced assessment, etc. I'm running tight on time here. But there's not a single final investment decision been made by any of these people, so economics still rules. UBCM, Union of BC Municipalities, and the Harbour Government stoutly opposed LNG projects. In 2008, UBCM passed a resolution, still in effect, saying, out of here in the Sailor's Sea to LNG tankers, and then when it was proposed to put an LNG facility in just south of the New Brunswick border in Maine, Mr. Harper stood up in Parliament and said, not on your nanny, it's too damn dangerous. Real estate values, bad news. Between 8 and 40%, anywhere near one of these things, you didn't buy. You're into this lovely thing that happened. BC is not likely to have an LNG fueled economy anytime soon because, well, a whole pot of people who know a lot more about economics than I do have said, this is rubbish. Thank you.